Capitol Report is a production of Senate Media Services.
As the leaves change and crops are harvested, we dig into the health of the state's agricultural economy. Governor Dayton bemoans a federal delay, and we take a look at important end-of-life conversations. Stay tuned for this week's Capitol Report. Welcome to this week's program. I'm Shannon Loehrke. At this year's Farm Fest, Governor Mark Dayton announced that the state will mandate a 20% biodiesel blend beginning in May of next year, building on a history of biodiesel implementation that began at 2% just over a decade ago. Joining me in the studio to talk about this and other agricultural issues is the Commissioner of Agriculture, David Frederickson. Welcome.
Thank you. Good to be here.
So about the biodiesel mandate, what is the significance of 20%?
Well, it's interesting that we're going to, you indicated earlier that governor will mandate it. The governor is not mandating it. Actually, the law mandates it. The law was put in place in a prior administration, and we're just basically following the law. It requires that there are about 4 provisions that have to be met, exactly 4 provisions, and the Department of Commerce, the Commissioner of the Department of Commerce, the Commissioner of the Department of PCA, Pollution Control Agency, and the Commissioner of Agriculture must examine the industry to see if the 4 conditions are met. And if they are, we will then just follow the law, and the law clearly states that you will go to B20 in 2018. And so that's what we're doing. We've examined the 4 issues and clearly feel that those issues are resolved, and that means, is there an adequate supply? Has there been a testing regimen that has been in place to determine if this can happen? And yes, there has. Is the ability to blend in place? And will 50 to 75% of the fuel be blended with Minnesota product? And so those conditions have been met, and we're moving forward. There's some argument on the part of some of the blenders that they don't have the blending capacity, but we examined that very carefully and determined that it has been, there is adequate blending capacity. So we're excited about seeing it move forward. It means a lot to agriculture particularly. It means a lot to clean air in Minnesota.
One of Governor Dayton's cornerstones is water quality. What is your department doing to aid in improved water quality in the state?
Well, we're doing a variety of things. We're responsible for groundwater, and we have developed, based on, again, a 30-year-old or 28-year-old statute, and I have to admit that I was part of the Minnesota Senate at that time. At that time, Senator Steve Morris was the primary author of the Groundwater Protection Act, and it called on the Department of Agriculture to promulgate rules to manage nitrates and nitrate contamination in well water across the state. So we've developed a protocol on well testing. We hope to have about 70,000 wells tested in vulnerable areas of Minnesota, and obviously the karst would be considered a vulnerable area. The central sands particularly, and some of the heavily farmed areas across Minnesota. And so we're concentrating our well testing on those areas right now. We have about 20,000 samples pulled, and of the 20,000, about 9.6% indicate that we have nitrates above the drinking water standard, which would be 10 parts per million. And so we're seeing not just 11 parts, but 20, 30, and 40 parts per million, which is a problem.
And these nitrates are from the fertilizers that are getting into the groundwater?
They could be from a lot of things. It could be from, lightning storms. It could be from just naturally occurring. But these areas are heavily farmed, and a significant amount of nitrogen is applied, whether in the form of urea or whether it's in the form of anhydrous ammonia. And so we're asking farmers to look carefully at fall application because nitrogen will be utilized when there's a growing plant, but when there's not a growing plant, it can leach away, and that's what causes problems in wells. So we're developing a rule, we're going through the promulgating process, we're holding hearings all across Minnesota. We have partnered with the governor on his 25 by 25 meetings, and we'll be holding meetings in conjunction with those with farmers to talk about very specifically about the nitrogen fertilizer management plan. They're not terribly comfortable with it, and those that are on the other side of the issue are not terribly comfortable with our approach. They feel it should be much more strict. And so the old adage is, if you got both sides angry, maybe you're hitting the sweet spot. So we hope to hit the sweet spot by the end of it.
So how is the agricultural economy in Minnesota faring right now?
Well, I would have to say not the best. I went through the 80s as a farmer in western Minnesota, and it was a real struggle. And I fear that we could be approaching some of those same concerns that we dealt with in the 1980s, and that is low commodity prices.
High land prices?
Well, not so much in those years,
okay.
But now we also have the low land prices generally parallel with low commodity prices. But today we have low commodity prices because we have excess. And we have high land prices, so it's really, really difficult to square or to cash flow, in this case, a farming operation. If you're a young person wanting to come back to the farm, diversification is a key for them. Lots of interest in organic agriculture. There's a lot of interest in diversifying. We have industrial hemp in Minnesota. Mm-hmm. You know, soybeans in the 50s was considered a new crop. And so we
not
have...
anymore.
Not anymore. Soybeans is an old crop and a standby and something you can rely on. But commodity prices are low. West central Minnesota today about $2.66 a bushel for corn. An average acre out there probably will run between $5,000 and $7,000, maybe more depending upon location and how it ties into some other piece of property. But a huge investment today for young people to come back. Virtually impossible to farm in a traditional base without some kind of help from mom, dad, grandma, grandpa, brothers, sisters, bank, anyone else. So, and the state of Minnesota. We have a program called the Rural Finance Authority, and we assist in helping bridge finance so folks can actually make it work. And so I encourage people, if they're listening, to look at our website. There are all kinds of opportunities on our website that we can assistance that we can provide.
Commissioner Frederickson, I want to thank you so much for your time today.
Oh, happy to be here anytime.
Governor Dayton and senior officials expressed frustration over the Trump administration's delay in approving Minnesota's health care reinsurance program passed during the 2017 legislative session.
We're still waiting. We've been waiting for weeks to get this formal approval from CMS and from the Department of Health and Human Services, and we can document, I don't know if we could provide the chronology of all the communications we've had in writing with CMS, as well as countless telephone conversations, meetings, to get this all lined up properly. We're told all along it was lined up properly, that there were no problems with it. I was told verbally by the Secretary of Health and Human Services and also by the CMS administrator in July that we would have this approval formally by the end of August, and now we're really at the deadline, the very deadline where MNsure has and the Department of Commerce have to decide on which rates to post, the ones that are with the reinsurance program or without, and it's about a 20% difference in rates. So this is jeopardizing the credibility and the integrity of the entire MNsure program.
Joining me now in the studio to talk about agriculture and rural economic issues is the chair of the Agriculture, Rural Development, and Housing Policy Committee, Senator Bill Weber. Welcome.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Last session, you authored a bill that would bring shrimp aquaculture to the state and also to your district. What is the status of that?
Well, actually, earlier this week on Monday, I attended a groundbreaking in Ballatin, Minnesota for True Shrimp. There, they had the groundbreaking for their new research harbor, Ballatin Bay Reef, and it'll be their research harbor plus the harbor which they train employees. And it's a much scaled down version of what the final harbors will look like when they are built. But it's an important first step in the process. They are also working to put the production facilities together in Marshall, and I think, quite frankly, we're underway. The groundbreaking for the first full-scale harbor should happen next spring.
And so how long before we get to buy Minnesota-grown shrimp?
Well, actually, as I look at that, the harbor, it's 9 acres under roof. However, they have it designed to a point where they can get a reef done and start producing while they go on to the next and the next. And so I don't have a specific timeline as to when that will be possible, but I think that I would think that sometime close to a year from now, I think we should be starting to have some possibilities of that happening.
Not long ago in the Worthington Daily Globe, you wrote about the passage of the 1-year moratorium on ditch mowing that happened in the last session. You said that it is, quote, lending a voice to farmers and landowners who have been adversely affected by the rule. In the really unscientific Senate State Fair poll, there was a question about ditch mowing, and 60% of those who responded were concerned about protecting habitat for pollinators and nesting birds. So what is the right policy going forward for this ditch mowing issue?
Well, I think that as you look at the ditch mowing issue, let's go back first when you talk about the time structure in that whole scenario. When you need to wait till August 1st, you've pretty much wasted the ability to utilize that as good hay. You just get too far, your plants get too fully developed, and the nutrient value of that plant goes down, and therefore those that are reliant on that for hay, it becomes less of a benefit to them. Also, I look at this and say, okay, as we talk about pollinator habitat, and I understand that, I've got tons of butterflies out in my garden right now, but the reality of it is, do you want butterflies coming to habitat crossing lanes of traffic that are traveling 55 to 65 miles an hour? Also, do you want for the breeding habitat for birds, do you want your pheasants gliding through the traffic pattern? So to me, it's not necessarily the most realistic and necessarily the best opportunity for those two factors in the first place. And I think many of the other rules that were being promulgated by the state at that point were also, I think, you had to do it this way, you had to have this, you had to have that. And I think we've been traveling those ditches and operating and mowing those ditches for years. I think there's just a general resentment that the state now can come in and tell us that we need to do it differently, or they think they know how to do it better. And so I think that right now we need to make sure that if you're going to develop rules for that you have people at the table that actually know what's going on out there. I think you also have to have people at the table, and I think the state office in St. Paul needs to listen to their district people, because if you talk to their district people, if the farming community says, fine, take care of your own road ditches, they don't have the equipment and the manpower to actually do it. So, the state has not been necessarily without their share of benefit in the farmers going out and doing this. And so hopefully in the final discussion we'll be able to reach some timelines that are realistic, that meet the needs of both parties, and actually at least they're approaching in a way that, quite frankly, they should have done in the first place.
Well, let's turn to Palmer amaranth, which is a very noxious and invasive weed. There was some stuff passed in the last legislative session to address this and other invasive species that are affecting Minnesota's agricultural economy. Can you talk a little bit about that? Well,
certainly. One of our chief concerns is that the areas in which Palmer amaranth has shown up in Minnesota has been in those areas that have conservation plantings. And, they said, well, the seed, that was sort of an isolated instance, how that seed got in there, but the reality of it is that the Palmer amaranth seed, which is an extremely fine seed, it is a challenge to keep it out of seed. And actually, you can go to the seed catalogs as a gardener and not find Palmer amaranth, but you can find different types of amaranth that are out there for the flower garden. So I mean, it is a real challenge, and every time that we actually seed an area of ground for the conservation plantings, we run that risk. Actually, with the buffer strip legislation and all that type of thing, the increased demand, which quite frankly we can't meet on a local basis, it actually gives rise to a greater risk for Palmer amaranth to be brought in.
So you're concerned that certain invasives are going to be brought in by the plantings that will be put in these buffer strips.
That's
and so it could actually make the problem worse?
It could. It could. Now, we kept being told by the department, during session, well, that this is a minor problem and what have you. But you know what happens to minor problems, particularly when you have plants that produce thousands of seeds, and then all of a sudden get distributed if they're left to go unchecked. And so it is a concern. It still is a concern, even with those actions that we took in the session.
And can you just go quickly through some of those actions that were taken during session?
Well, we actually made sure that there was money there for continued research in how to control it, because that's been part of the problem. It is an extremely difficult plant to control, except for fire and going out and literally burning these plants. And then also we did have provision that we wanted to have only Minnesota grown seed. That did not make it into the final bill, but that was the main thing that happened during session.
Commodity prices right now are pretty low, and when you consider that the average age of farmers in Minnesota is 50, what is your advice for people looking to get into farming since it's so cost prohibitive?
Well, the challenge has been there for quite some time as far as getting our young people into the farming business. The cost of land, the cost of rent, the cost of equipment have all been extremely high for quite a while. Now you couple that with the poor commodity prices that you referred to, and it becomes very difficult even for existing farmers to remain in the business. The fortunate thing that we're at a point right now, for those of us that remember the 1980s and the difficulties that we had in the farm economy at that time, we're at a different point in terms of most of our farmers are not, from a debt standpoint, in as serious of a situation as they were back then. And certainly we've seen lower interest rates, which has also made a substantial difference. But when you stop and think about that, this year in many areas of the state, we are looking at a reduced crop yield because we had really wet early and then we had really dry in the middle, and so we have acres that this year are not producing very good crop that had excellent crops last year. The compounding of a lower yield for many people plus the lower price is really going to be difficult. As far as our young people, we did try to take some action this year in the tax bill and providing benefits to people who sell to whether it's equipment, whether it's land, and there are different formulas depending upon which assets you're talking about, to young farmers in order to help them get started. But the reality of it remains that unless you have a specific farmer, be it a relative, be it a neighbor, just be it a friend of the family who knows that you want to get started, it remains a very difficult venture for our young people to get started. And usually at some point they need to have the security of an established farmer working with them in order to help them get into the business.
Almost an apprenticeship.
Well, in many respects, yes. In many respects, yes. And a lot of times they can manage to work out trading of physical labor for equipment use, and that type of thing. But it is right now with cash rents in my area being, for example, running anywhere from, it's a broad range, but there's rents well over $300 an acre to well over $200 an acre. And when you have corn at less than $3 a bushel and all the price of the inputs that go into that, it doesn't work out.
Yeah, it's a challenging proposition.
That's right.
Senator Weber, it's always a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good to be here.
The Senate Select Committee on Health Care will ultimately make recommendations to the legislature for ways to rein in the rising costs of health care. Recently, the committee heard testimony about the value of conversations surrounding end-of-life care.
We know that people aren't dying where they want to die. Some reports say 7 out of 10 people say that they want to die at home, yet 15% actually do. There's a big disconnect there. 70% of people actually die in hospitals, long-term care facilities, and nursing homes. We spend a lot in healthcare, as you all know, over 20% nationally, and I think 32% in Minnesota is what I've seen.
Most of us would like to die quietly in our sleep without any kind of disability or illness at the end of life. That'll happen to about 20% of us. The rest of the 80% of us will die slowly over the last several years with increasing disability, and about half the time, you're going to be too sick for us to ask you directly what you want. That's why this is an important thing. You need to have somebody else that can step in, make decisions that you would want made, knows what you would want, and doesn't have to carry that guilt around the rest of their life.
Many people consider testifying before a committee a daunting proposition. Producer John Brune put together a guide to help the public better understand the most effective ways of addressing legislative committees.
The committee process is a primary step in developing and passing legislation at the state capitol. Those who testify during a committee meeting can play a significant role in determining the outcome of that legislation. Often those who testify are government officials or lobbyists, but the voice of the public is also a key element in the committee process.
I think public testimony is really important for a number of reasons. Legislators simply cannot be experts on all topics. You usually have 3,000 bills that get introduced in a legislative session on a lot of different topics, and they may serve on 4 or 5 committees, so it's really hard for them to become experts in every single topic. So I do think that public testimony provides an opportunity for them to hear a perspective that they may not have thought of.
The personal experiences of individual citizens brings important and valuable testimony to the process, providing lawmakers with another point of view to consider when debating legislation.
We know every bill has an impact on people's lives. What we want to hear is how does that person testifying and addressing the Senate feel about that bill? How would it affect their lives? What is the story behind it? Stories are really powerful in moving legislators and helping to form an opinion. And it's a great way for us to see a real-world application of some of the things of the issues we're addressing.
It is those human stories more than anything that absolutely touches legislators. When somebody comes in and really connects with us and tells us how something has affected their lives and their families and their communities, it absolutely makes a difference.
Personal experience is one way to have an impact at the Capitol. Being well organized and keeping statements brief are others. On any given day, legislators sit through numerous committees, wade through pages of data, and listen to hours of testimony. Using time wisely is key to committee testimony.
There are 2 items in the direct care and treatment services area that I would like to specifically mention. The first is the child and adolescent.
I have kind of 3 little quick rules that I try to follow. Keep it simple, keep it short, keep it focused. Legislators, you have to respect their time. There's usually a dozen or 2 dozen people waiting in line to testify on given bills. So your testimony really needs to be at a pretty fast clip pace. I try to keep testimony usually at 2 to 3 minutes. I try to get to the important things right up front. I usually try to focus on just 2 to 3 points, because if it gets much more than that, then you're diluting what message you're trying to convey.
Keep a presentation around 2 to 3 minutes if you can. That leaves a little time for senators to ask questions if there are questions. Make sure that you're prepared. You know what you're going to talk about. Don't just come up and wing it, so to speak.
Credibility is the currency in which legislators and professional and citizen lobbyists deal. Truthful information is any testifier's best friend. It is the foundation for the laws that are passed at the Capitol.
Being forthright, credible, and respectful are the cornerstones of great testimony. We base our decisions on the information that is being presented in these hearings. So to be credible is extremely important.
The whole testimony process, really, you're not sworn in, it's not a court of law, but it is based on a trust system that you are telling the truth when you testify. It's important for a lobbyist never to bluff, never to provide false information. They don't want to exaggerate or extend the circumstances that may have happened to them. Just be specific, and if there is a question that they can't answer, they can offer to get back to a legislator as well.
Participation in the legislative process takes many forms. Meeting and corresponding with lawmakers are common methods. Committee testimony is another, one where lawmakers welcome and encourage public participation.
I think we all have that image from congressional testimony where someone stands up and holds up their right hand and there are all the photographers sitting in front of them. It is nothing like that in the Minnesota legislature. You know, you'll have a couple of people sitting at the testifiers table, and you'll have a line of senators or representatives there to just sort of listen, and then there'll be maybe a little dialogue after the fact. But the whole point is to welcome people into this process.
I'm a mother of 3, I'm a housewife.
Legislators are very respectful for people who are testifying for the first time. Think of it as just communicating with 10 people, try to block out all the other people in the room. You truly are the expert at your story. Nobody else knows the details or what perspective you bring. You're sharing your thoughts. These aren't things like a test where there's a right or wrong. This is your perspective.
We appreciate you making the effort to be here with us. Thank you for your time.
I did not think I would be here sitting telling you that, hey, I got you.
Giving testimony does not guarantee passage or failure of legislation, but it could influence one or more committee members, and that may be enough to determine the outcome.
I think, and this is something that any of us who are trying to be persuasive in any facet of our life, what we're trying to do is get a message across and persuade somebody to see it our way. And I think the most important part of that is to be really clear on what you think is the most persuasive point you can make and how you can make it. And keep it simple.
Try to identify what the problem is and what it is you would like legislators to do about it. It's not just good enough to get up there and say, this is a problem, this is a problem, this is a problem. How do you want legislators to help solve that problem?
If you're prepared, if you hit a few key points, and if you can make it personal, you've got an effective presentation. A legislator may not walk in your shoes. We don't have your experiences. We don't have your perspective. And that's what we're looking for from you. We want you to share with us how laws, bills affect your life.
And again, once again.
Join us again next week as we delve into more topics affecting Minnesotans. I'm Shannon Loehrke, and on behalf of all of us at Senate Media Services, thanks for watching.